That's what you do.
Okay, we're learning a Sikha from the Rebbe from Shavuos Tavshin and Aleph. We are way into the Sikha. We're holding my Ois Yud Gimel, page 577. Correct. Ois Yud Gimel. Okay, here in this chelik of the Sikha, the Rebbe comes back to answer one of the questions that were asked earlier on in the Sikha regarding this, that it says all the machlekes in between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, Lasad Lavai, instead of paskening like Beis Hillel, Bisman Hazeh, we're going to go paskin like Beis Shammai. What was the question that I've asked in the beginning of the Sikha? That l'chayre, you would think it should be the other way around. It should be the other way around. Beis Shammai is the one. Beis Shammai is the one that's machmer. Beis Shammai is the one that's stringent, meaning he says that it's impossible to elevate this, it's impossible to elevate that. This is no good. This is no good. That Beis Shammai sounds like a Golos attitude. Beis Hillel says it's all good, it's all beseder. You can use this for the mitzvah. You can do this. This is all kosher and this is tied. It sounds more Mashiach, doesn't it? Instead, lost the will paskin like Beis Shammai. What's the reason for this? Okay, so the Rebbe is going to bring a deeper understanding in the machlekes of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, that in fact Beis Shammai is on a higher level. Let's begin. So now we'll understand what the chiddush is, that when Mashiach comes, we will paskin like Beis Shammai. So let's first give a general explanation for all the arguments between not shul members but Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Okay, so what's the machlekes here between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? Beis Shammai oisrim. Generally speaking, Beis Shammai are the ones that come and say that something is prohibited. Beis Hillel matir. Beis Hillel's approach always is no, it's mutter, it's allowed. So what's really their argument? It's the argument is all about when Torah is relating to the objects of the world. And there's a question whether something is able to be used and elevated through Torah, or it can't be used. It can't be elevated through Torah. That's the machlekes of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. So first, the Rebbe sets down the premise where both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree. When it comes to those things that are definitely negative, so everybody would agree, the only way to refine this is by rejecting it. There are certain things that you have to push away with the left hand, and those are the things that are tamei, Oster, and Fishel. Meaning there are certain things in the world that the Eibishter created them in the first place for you to reject them. Why did the Eibishter create them? Only for the purpose that it'll pose a certain challenge to a Yid, and you won't become affected by this challenge. Not only will you not be affected, on the contrary, it'll only strengthen your commitment and your devotion to a mitzvah. And by rejecting this nisayon, that itself elevates the godly energy that's there in this nisayon. You're revealing the truth of why this nisayon was created, only to reveal the truth of the Eibishter with greater intensity. That's really what it's about. Whenever that's true about any time a person experiences any kind of challenge in the world, that's the only reason why the Eibishter allows the person to go through an nisayon. It's in order to reject it, and it brings out within the Yid a greater commitment to the Eibishter. Generally speaking, this is true about all mitzvahs leisesa, that the Eibishter creates things in the world that we are not allowed to have any contact with. So you could ask the question, if the Eibishter doesn't want us to have any contact with them, don't create it in the first place. Why create all these things? So the answer is the same answer regarding most of Olam Hazeh. Most of Olam Hazeh is a place where Yid has no business being in. It's a place that Yid doesn't belong. So why does the Eibishter create all of this? One aspect of the answer is, there's different aspects to this to answer this question. One part of the answer to this question is that the Eibishter creates all these parts of Olam Hazeh that are Oster just in order for a Yid to stay away from them, to reveal a greater commitment within himself to the Eibishter. Okay, that's the areas of Smail Deicha.
The Rambam says that they were created for Goyim.
They were created for
Goyim.
Who are Goyim? What are they?
So there's
no such thing as Goyim. There's a purpose. The Goyim have a purpose for their existence.
But that's the Havdalah. that there's Goyim and there's Yidden. They can
So
do
the
all this, and you
Goyim-
can't do that.
So the Goyim were all created in order to serve the Yidden, right? Like Nivra El Shem Sheni, all created.
But they can eat what they can eat, and then we
Correct.
can't. Mitzvah Havdalah.
No, okay.
No, they could have made only mutter diggers also. They don't have to eat.
If everything
Okay.
was mutter, then there'd be no challenge in the world.
So now you're getting back to the point that I said before, that it's all about creating a challenge to bring out a deeper commitment within the Yid. Now, those things that are definitely permitted in Yoni Arishos, so all those permissible things that are permitted for a Yid, L'kula Alma, everybody would agree, Habiri by Fishel Kirov. So how do you refine and elevate these things? By closeness, by having contact with them, engaging with them, elevating them. Yemim Mekareves. The right side, which is there to bring it close, to elevate. Those are the things that are tar, mutter, v'kosher. They're pure, they're allowed, and they're kosher. Using them for the sake of heaven. Whether you do different actions in your life, even though they're permissible and they're personal, they're private, but yet you're doing them all with a certain kavanah for the sake of heaven, and even more so, there are certain things you do in your life. It's not only for the sake of heaven, but you can actually find and see knowledge of Hashem there in those actions themselves. So this refines and purifies and elevates it to holiness. Now, then you have those areas that there's a doubt. It's unclear whether they're fit to be elevated or not. Are these objects or situations that a Yid has to stay away? You have to reject them. Or it's possible, if it's possible, then you must to engage with them and elevate them into holiness. So what's the reason? Why are these areas in doubt? What's this gray area all about? It's a level of ra, there's a level of evil here, or of a certain level of klippah that's very, very subtle, and it's very, very concealed. It's not an actual level of ra where you can see clearly that this is something that the Eivishter says that has no shaychus to Yid. There's a level of ra which is there in potential, and it's there very, very concealed. Or something similar. So here, this is where the argument is, when you have something that the ra that's in it is extremely subtle. So how do you deal with this? Do you have to stay away from it? Or could you engage with it and elevate it into Kedusha? So those are the difference between the approach of Bishamai and Bisilel. If you take a look in Order 118, so the Rebbe points out the idea that B'chlal, this is the general approach, the difference between Bishamai and Bisilel, that the Rebbe explained many, many times. There's the explanation of many arguments in Shas between Bishamai and Bisilel. Bishamai follows what the potential state of something is. And Bisilel follow what it actually is, not its potential state. Two famous examples of this one is from Hanukkah that we just came from. Bishamai says the first night of Hanukkah, you still have in potential 8 days that are going to enter, so light 8 candles. Bisilel says, no, begin Hanukkah, light 1. Because it actually only is the first day. The other days are only there potentially. It's one famous place where you see this. Another one is the difference between Rosh Hashanah Lilanis from Bishamai and Bisilel. Bishamai says Rosh Hashanah Lilanis is Rosh Chodesh Shvat, because then in Eretz Yisrael, where it only rains in the winter and the trees, the sraf, there's some kind of moisture in the trees comes up, so there's a potential of it that begins in Rosh Chodesh Shvat. Bisilel says, no, it's in the middle of the month. In the middle of the month, when it gets a bit warmer, that's when you have the actual beginning of the moisture inside the tree coming up, and therefore the Rosh Hashanah of the new season of the trees begins then on Chamish Asa. Okay, so it's related to what the Rebbe is saying here. When you have a subtle ra that's hidden, so the question is this something to pay attention to or not? Beishamai says yes, and Bisilel says no, as the Rebbe will explain here. Beishamai, so now Beishamai's opinion is the source of Beishamai's neshama comes from the level of gvuras. So therefore, Netiya Sichlam Hilahachmer. Their approach with their seichel is to be more stringent. Litchais v'leser, and therefore they say to reject and to aser gam ho'inyonim shara shebemu b'koyach b'elam b'vad. Even those things where the ra that's in them is so subtle and so concealed, but nevertheless, Beishamai says that just for that little ra that's there, it's enough of a reason that you have to stay away from it. Beisil, on the other hand, Beisil sheshayrish nishmasam mebchinas achasadim. The shayrish of their neshama comes from a place of chesed. So netiya sichlam hilahakol. So therefore, their approach is that no, you have to be lenient. That if you look at what this situation or object is, the majority of it, and outwardly, how if you're going to engage with it, what are you going to experience primarily? Positive. The evil that's there is very subtle, and it's something that you could ignore. It's possible to ignore it, and you can engage with it and use it in a holy way. So therefore, they say as long as you don't have the ra that's there outwardly, that's disturbing you of elevating it to the Eibishter, Beisilo says you're able to engage with it and stay away from the ra. The ra will not disturb you. You'll be able to elevate it to the Eibishter. Beishamai says no. Since there's some kind of a level of ra there, it's possible that if you'll engage with it, so then that ra will schlep you down. It can bring you into, you can be connected to that ra. So therefore, you have to stay away from it.
On the Bisham, you have to throw in the word potentially.
Correct. Potentially. What? Yeah.
Well, potentially, the ra could be there.
Right.
But Fishel is
Correct,
saying in actuality, the poil, it's not. It could be like that. You don't look at that.
Exactly. But look, when you say according to Beishamai, potential, depends how you tie it to the word potential. Sometimes we think the word potential means something that might develop in the future. And in the present, it's not there at all. But the word potential really means something deeper. The word potential means that it could develop in the future, because even in the present, when it hasn't developed yet, there is the potential for it. There's the potential means that it's there already in the present in a potential form. So there is an existence of a subtle ra that the Beishamai says you have to stay away from. Okay, the chiluk zeh. So this distinction between Beishamai and Beisil, Mirum is gam b'shmeiseh. It's also hinted in their names. The Rabbi brings in the order that you have to be medayik in the names of people, especially here in the Tanoim. Rabbi Meir used to be medayik in the names of people. So you medayik in the name of the Beishamai and Beisil, you could see where their approach comes from, that they had a different shaydish in their neshama. Shammai, what does the word Shammai mean? Meloshin, Hasham or Chaysav. A person that's measuring or estimating or evaluating every step he takes. Shammai is much more critical about the ways a person takes, that you have to be careful where you go, where you shouldn't go. Shashoikel drachav, he measures and weighs each one of his steps and his ways, betachlis, azihiris, and being extremely careful. Gamin yonim deran elam. Even if you're dealing with a potential of ra which is concealed. So therefore, Beishamai, which is more critical, says when you find that ra nelam, so he asks it, you have to stay away from that. Hillel, on the other hand, what's the name Hillel mean? That there's a candle that's shining and is illuminating that's upon my head. It's a lashon of a pasuk. In other words, Hillel means to shine, to illuminate. Just shine and reveal, which means Hillel's approach is don't be so critical. Instead of looking in the details and seeing and finding that there's a ra nelam, bring the positive, the light, the kedusha that there is, and with that light, you'll be able to elevate, and the ra hanela will not affect you. That's Hillel's approach. Okay, this hezbollah is based on Silakuta Torah. Shir Hashirim, the Alter Rebbe says this hezbollah. The difference between Beisil and Beishamai, the Rebbe brings in other places. This is the famous story. The difference between Beishamai and Beisil, when the ger came to Beishamai and said, "Kaireni, you make me a ger on manas, condition that you teach me kol HaTorah kula al regal achas." So Beishamai dochafe b'amas habinyan. He pushed him away. He had some kind of a tool that he was using for building, and he pushed him away. Beisil told him, and he said, I taught you the whole Torah, regalachas. So here you see this also these two approaches, how Beis Hillel was able to reveal the potential that this person had. Apparently, he had a neshama, and he brought it out on him. But Beishamai was more critical. Beishamai is shomer chaysav. He measures and wasn't able to elevate him.
But they said it was the greater.
Oh, the chayrit comes out the Basil is the greater one. So here, the Rebbe is going to explain and show you how Asad Lavai, there'll be a tremendous maila in the opinion of Beishamai that comes out. Yesh lahaisif. Based on what we said until there, we can add and explain. Shachiluk ben Beishamai Beisilol who gam bedargas hatayre shal yadanasa bir. It depends what level of Torah you're accessing, what level of Torah you're using to refine and elevate the world. Beishamai chadaditve. The Rebbe already brought earlier the Sicha. Beishamai was sharper, so they were able to get a deeper chelik of Torah. Darge nailas yesib b'limud Torah, a deeper level of learning Torah. Habekayach shebet Torah. That's potential in Torah. In other words, a hidden part of Torah, pnimius at Torah, the inside, the deeper secrets of Torah. Shebekaycha yechaylim levarer loy rak ra hagoloi, and therefore, with this part of Torah, you're able to refine and elevate not only a revealed evil that's there, elegam ra nelam, but even the ra nelam. So what the Rebbe is basically saying over here is, when you see Beishamai is the one that pays attention to the ra nelam, he's noticing the ra nelam, so that seems like a chesarim. But Beishamai is more concerned that you may fall. There's only a ra nelam there, but we can't. It's a precaution. I'm not going to allow you to engage with something that has a subtle ra because you may fall into it. It may schlep you down. Fishel is not so concerned. Fishel says, come with the light of Torah, and therefore you're not going to fall in it so much. But the Rebbe here flips it around. The Rebbe says, no, that's maybe the way to look at Beishamai and Fishil's opinion, Bisman Hazeh. But really, the way to look at it from the perspective of Moshiach and Geula, what's going to happen, then we'll see the fact that Beishamai notices the Ra Nelam, and therefore he tells you that you have to stay away from that Ra Nelam. That's because Beishamai reaches and sees that Ra Nelam. Fishel doesn't see that Ra Nelam in the first place. When you deal with a lower level in Torah, so that Ra Nelam doesn't exist. On a lower level of Torah, that Ra Nelam is not there at all. It depends how you define, but let's put it in such words. It depends to what extent you define the truth and the emes of Einoid Mulvadai, of the absolute unity of Hashem and the oneness of Hashem, whether the Ra Nelam is even Ra, whether you define it as Ra. The stronger you define Einoid Mulvadai, that it's Einoid Mulvadai absolute, if it's the real ultimate absolute Einoid Mulvadai, where there could be nothing that could have even any type of subtle disagreement to this truth of Einoid Mulvadai, that's Ra. It's Ra Nelam. That's that hidden Ra that's there. If you're accessing a darga in Torah which is lower, it's not the ultimate Einoid Mulvadai. So then this level that Beishamai refers to as Ra Nelam, on this lower level of Einoid Mulvadai, it's not called Ra Nelam. I'll give you a simple example, which Chassidus speaks about. Chassidus brings the Gemara regarding a person that's standing right in front of the king. The Gemara Chagigi says, when you come and stand right in front of the king, so even if you're there with your friend and you're signaling to him with your eyes or with any motions that you make standing right in front of the king, and you're having a conversation with the king and you're signaling and motioning to your friend, so merida b'malchus. You just rebelled against the king because you don't signal to your friend in front of the king. Yichayev misa. That's if you're standing right in front of the king. It's a different presence. The king, the melech alein, you're right in front of the king. How can you do this? What's if you're outside the palace and you're having a conversation with your friend? You can have a conversation and signal to your friend as much as you want. You're not standing in front of the melech. So you're still in the melech's country. You still may even be in the melech's property. You're right outside the palace. You're right there. You're very close to the king. And the ministers and the kingdom is you're very close, but you're not right in front of the king. So it depends. The closer you get, the more taikif, the truth of the Eibishter is present, the more the bittul of the mitzias of the world is revealed. So therefore, the real machlokes between Beishamai and Fishel is not that Beishamai and Fishel are both saying that the Ra Hanelam is there. Elamai Beishamai is saying that Ra Hanelam which is there, I'm concerned that it may trip you. It's a precaution. You're afraid of it. And Fishel says, no, I'm not concerned about it. No, the machlokes is different. In the level of Fishel, that Ra Hanelam is not there in the first place because Fishel is dealing with a lower level of Torah. When you're in a lower level of Torah, and the malchus of the Eibishter is not revealed with the greatest intensity, so then it's not a stira to Gatlichkeit. That level of Torah is able to tolerate the existence of the world on this level. When you come to Beis Shammai, which reveals a deeper aspect of Torah, the sharpness of Beis Shammai, according to what the Rebbe is saying over here, what's the sharpness of Beis Shammai? It will push it intellectually smarter than Beis Hillel. That's not what it's about. The sharpness of Beis Shammai is the koyach of their neshama. They were able to zero into the pnimius HaTorah, to the highest level of Torah. In the highest level of Torah, even the most subtle mitzias of Olam Hazeh, that's not bottled betachlis to the Eibishter, is Ra'an Elam. So the chiddush of Beis Shammai is the very fact that you're even noticing this level of Ra'an Elam. So therefore, Beis Shammai is on a much deeper level. Right, so that's the koyach of Beis Shammai, which is smarter, which is not smarter than, like I just explained, that they can zero into the pnimius of Torah. Shenkin Beis Hillel, on the other hand, Beis Hillel shalom the matayre kafishi b'payol b'galoi nigla the Torah. Beis Hillel learns Torah the way it is in the more practical level of Torah, the Torah the way it is revealed, nigla the Torah. Ein in yonam levare ra nelam. So their union is not to refine and elevate that Ra Nelam, because in this level, the Ra Nelam, it doesn't show up as Ra at all. Uba Matzav Kazesh Eina Inyan Levara Ra Nelam. So therefore, since they don't have this deeper level of Torah where this Ra Nelam gets noticed, so Asa Litchais L'Rachik Dvarim Shiachayel Mekarvam L'Aleis L'Tusha. On this level of Torah, you're allowed to elevate it into Kedusha. Another simple example for this would be the difference between Shabbos and a regular weekday. On Shabbos, what's Oster to do on Shabbos during the week, a person must work during the week. Like the Rebbe always would bring the Lashon that says in the Pasuk, Sheishes Yomim Tasam Malacha, Vayem Shvi Tishbeis. So it says the Lashon in the Medrash, Sheishes Yomim Tasam Malacha Mitzvah. So the same thing that on Shabbos you say that you're not allowed to do Malacha, it's Oster, and then during the week it's a mutter and it's a mitzvah. What's the difference? Because Shabbos is Aliyah Seilemis, and on this level, when there's a greater intensity and presence of the Melech himself, the Eibishter, you're more connected to the Eibishter, so the closer you are, the more bittul is demanded, and therefore, Malacha is Asa. When you're on a lower level during the week, so there, the Eibishter places you in a world which is, so to speak, not in his presence, although the emissaries were always in the presence of the Eibishter, but there's the Hel and the Hester, and therefore we're in the Metzias of the world. Here, Adarabah, the Eibishter demands of you, and the Kavanah is work and utilize the things in the world, L'Shem Shemayim. So that's basically the difference between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel, now you can understand that Beis Hillel's approach is actually more related to Bisman Hazeh. Bisman Hazeh, when the revelation of godliness is not as intense, and therefore there's that Hel and V'Hester, the Kavanah of Golus, that we are in such a situation, is to utilize these situations, to use it for the Eibishter's sake. And the Ra Nelam doesn't even show up on the radar. There is no Ra Nelam. Just like during the week, working is not called Ra. During the week, working is positive. When Mashiach comes and the whole world will be elevated into Yom Shekulei Shabbos U'Menucha L'Chaya Ilamim, then everything will be Shabbosdik the entire time. So now all of a sudden, things that were permitted today, loss of love, will show up that, hey, wait a minute, Einoid Mulvadai is deiche any subtle thing that's not bottled betachlis to the Eibishter. The real Einoid Mulvadai is absolute. And it doesn't allow for anything, even the tiny bit of feeling, of sense of self and not absolute bittul is totally eradicated. So therefore, Dafke Beis Shammai will be lost of love.
To understand a little more in a halachic sense, so say, for example, the Indian of Batul B'Shishim would be reflective of a Beis Hillel sheet, as opposed to Beis Shammai, he would hold that, no, it's Batul B'Shishim, but it's there.
Okay, interesting. Interesting example.
And on the Gabi Pesach, for example, is also the Mashiach.
Because you're on a higher level.
That would reflect.
Interesting, Marshall. Okay, good. Yeah, interesting. Ulacheng. So the Rebbe explains this. So therefore, Bisman Hazeh, today's time, Shematz Vaylamhu. What's the condition of the world? Shroiv b'nei Adam shayachim l'dargasam shel Beis Shammai. Sorry, so the b'nei Adam, most people, einam shayachim l'dargasam shel Beis Shammai. We are not on the level to be like Beis Shammai, which is lishkel v'ledaktik darkeim, to weigh and to be very, very particular in our ways, but tachlis hazehiris, with absolute carefulness, gam miran nelam. And you should notice that even something which is not 100% batal to Hashem, so that's already considered to be a concealed and subtle evil. and therefore to be able to be mevarer al yidei dargan nihilus b'teira through a higher level of teira that notices this ra and elam. So halacha kibisilo. So therefore, bisman hazeh halacha is kibisilo. And you have to understand when the Rebbe says over here that this is the matzav of roiv b'nei adam in the time of Galus. So there's a kavanah in this. The Eibishter is the one that created this nature of roiv b'nei adam. That most people are living in a world that they cannot live constantly Shabbosdik. Most people can't live with Yechidish B'Nefesh every day. We can't live with Yom Kippur every day. We can't live Shabbos every day. Why? Because the Eibishter wants us to reach the lowest elements of Olam Hazeh. If we would live Shabbosdik every day, we wouldn't be able to make a Dira B'Tachtainim in the lowest elements of the world. So that's our Aveda today. Today our Aveda is like Beis Hillel. So much so, Beis Shammai, B'Mokim Beis Hillel, and a Mishnah, the Gemara many times says that when the words of Beis Shammai are mentioned in the place together with Beis Hillel, it's as if that's not part of the Mishnah. It's so rejected in halacha that it's like not even a second opinion at all. And this point is so important that we have to pass on like Beis Hillel, that when it once happened that the students of Beis Shammai were more than Beis Hillel, it was considered to be such a terrible day, similar to the day that the Egel was made. What's the reason? Why is it so terrible? If you're rejecting and distancing from the boundaries of holiness, such things that could have been elevated, so you're actually empowering Klippah, the other side. If this is the way the Eibishter created the world in Olam Hazeh today, that the condition is that we don't sense the takeif of the Einod Milvadai, the way it's going to be lost at Lavai, and the Eibishter allows for an existence of a Tachtain, that's because there's a Kavanah in this Dira B'Tachtainim. So if you don't fulfill the Dira B'Tachtainim, so then you're empowering Klippah in Olam Hazeh, because it comes out that the condition that the Eibishter created is not getting used for what it should be. On the other hand, will be Moshiach Shiur, but then when Mashiach comes, so then the halacha will be like Beis Shammai. So first and foremost, the point here is that the way of thinking of the Chachamim, that are the ones that have to decide who we paskin like, their way of thinking is going to be different. And it's going to be corresponding to the change that will be in the world in general when Mashiach comes. A dayan always has to paskin based on what he can see. So bisman hazeh, they see the world in the condition that it is today. The Chachamim will see the world the way it is then, and then it will be kedas Beis Shammai, like the opinion of Beis Shammai. Why is that? Then when Mashiach comes, so the obvious level of evil will already be totally separated from what's good. So now So now we'll be on a higher level of people that can now notice even the subtle evil when you reveal the true Einoid Milvada of the Eibishter. So then that rejects even the most subtle evil as well in the world. The daktik, the lishkel, darchei, and betachlis as the heroes, and therefore to be very specific and to weigh their ways and very carefully. Gami ra nelam, the helam of b'koyach. Now all of a sudden, this ra nelam will show up on the radar. Meaning, when you have the truth that's revealed with such intensity when Mashiach comes, that ra nelam will all of a sudden matter. And therefore, when Mashiach comes, dafka, then you can completely eradicate even the most subtle evil. How do you define the most subtle evil? Even any potential for something that will come to go against the Eibishter.